All right, everybody, welcome back. Good afternoon. We've got another Byron Murphy video here. And this video is not going to be for everybody. I basically just wanted to share the notes I wrote down when I was watching his tape from a couple of these games, just to kind of show how I formulated some of the pros and cons that I put up above. Obviously, some of those pros and cons had to deal with things more objective, like stats, things more clear from testing rather than actual game tape. But some of it gets derived from what you see on the tape. So some people might wonder why I'm not doing game footage because and because obviously this would go better if I could show clips on screen. But last time I tried to do that, YouTube wasn't having it. This was a little while ago, but I tried to do some actual like tape study on a stream a couple of years ago, and YouTube just black screened it. They wouldn't even let me do it. So I kind of from that I kind of got soured on it. So this is typically how I end up doing things, which I know is imperfect, but I just wanted to kind of share how I got to some of the conclusions on this guy. So I looked at two Byron Murphy games in particular here. The first one was at home against BYU. These both of these games, I believe, were from when Quinn Ewers was hurt, and they had to lean pretty heavily on that Texas defense to win games, and they did. So we're going to start with the BYU game here. This was one of his best games according to PFF. This was one of his best games according to the pressure count. However, it was a game where he did not record a single actual quantifiable stat, as in he did not have any tackles, did not have any sacks, did not have any assisted tackles. He was just out there impacting play after play after play. This is a very impressive game to watch, having seen every snap he played. 32 total snaps on defense, by the way. So he actually only played about half the game because it was a blowout. And 23 of his snaps were pass rush snaps, 6 quarterback pressures. So more than 1 out of every 4 times he would rush the passer, he would get a QB pressure. So going through the game, the first thing that stands out to me is how often he's lined up over a gap. And I talked about this earlier, but it really does bear repeating here that he is the one lined up over that gap between the center and right guard a lot, even though he is the 300-pounder and he's playing with T'Vondre Sweat, which is not what you would expect at all. Theoretically, you would expect Sweat to be the guy absorbing nose tackle snaps, but not always. Sometimes, yes. But it was a very interesting way they used him here. On the second defensive snap, he splits through a double team to generate pressure. Again, it was a thing where on a defensive line where he's playing with a 360-pound man, it seems like BYU thought Murphy was the guy who needed to be double teamed more than Sweat. And on that second play, he splits through the double team and generates pressure. It was like he kind of shot the gap, but both guys were kind of focused on him. He just kind of won anyway. It was just a complete mismatch for him. And on the third snap of the game, he actually lined up as an edge rusher. And he lines up on the outside, gets the tackle to overset, and then he uses a little, you can barely even call it a move. It's more just like he goes to the inside and he's so quick, the tackle can't recover, and he gets a quarterback hit out of it. Forces, I think it might have been an interception, but it was definitely an incomplete at least. So, really impressive repertoire pulled out from him immediately. There were some plays where Texas would go to an odd front where they would have 3 down linemen, and Murphy was consistently being used as the nose tackle on these odd fronts. So he would just line up in the middle. I think Sweat would be on the bench on these reps. There was one play early on where he was lined up as the nose tackle right over the center, and he immediately just sheds through the center to make his way into the backfield. There was one play on a 3rd and long early where he did a little bit of like a stunt from the, I want to say, left side of Sweat over to the right side. He got a little caught up on him. It looked a little bit awkward. It looked a little bit weird. Didn't really generate much of anything, but I did notice him trying to stunt around the other tackle. He got a decent chunk of plays off after those first 2 drives. There were 3 plays on the 3rd drive, and then there were 3 plays on the 4th drive. and I didn't see Murphy on the field for either. So he gets a significant amount of time off. He comes back in on the fifth drive of the game for the Kansas State offense. And, I'm noticing that he is getting double teamed on running plays up the middle as well. And he's holding up fairly well. He's not shedding through it all the time, but he is holding his ground. He's not getting completely bullied in this game. And it's a pretty respectable performance for a guy who, I mean, again, it's just very interesting. You have a team that has a genuine nose tackle with NFL nose tackle size, and it's still Murphy who they seem to like more in these nose tackle type situations. There was one A gap run where he got pushed back a little bit by the center. He kind of got caught out of balance and got pushed back just a little bit. It was like a third down and short where he just got pushed back a little bit. And then on the fourth down, immediately following it, he fought through traffic pretty respectably, tried to get to the ball, couldn't quite get there, still looked good. Even though this was a day where he wasn't credited with any tackles, he was frequently around the ball, and you can kind of see the clowny stuff in him where he's disruptive, he's affecting the play, he's doing good things, but he's just for one reason or another, he never finishes the job. Somebody else finishes the job. I mean, for Tavondre Sweat to be a better finisher than you, it's notable because Sweat is going to be the guy you would assume would just take up space in the middle and never tackle anybody, but it's not the case at all. So you watch these reps against BYU, and he's pretty much always finding his way through traffic to the ball. He's just not making the tackle. BYU ran some stretch plays to the outside, and you see the lateral agility with Murphy to be able to stay with the play and not necessarily make the play, but affect it and still be involved in the play, take away certain lanes of opportunity for the offense. So you can see his ability to move back and forth on the line of scrimmage. There was a third and short where he was able to get pressure by shooting a gap between two linemen. Again, he gets double teamed on a third down and he finds a way to beat it. Again, he mostly just does it with his quickness and his burst. So that stuff is going to translate to the NFL mostly, right? Like, it won't translate the way that it did against a team like BYU, but it's still really good. He's consistently getting doubled. That was one thing that I wrote down here on pass and run plays. It seems like there's always at least a guy who's chipping him. There's always a guy who is helping on him. There's always this fear of him over all else on that defensive line. He is the guy that BYU's offensive line is worried about more than anybody else. So there was a one drive. I think it was in the third quarter at this point. Maybe it was right at the end of the second quarter. He was rotated out of the Texas D after they gave up a couple first downs. They gave up a really long drive at one point in that game, and he got rotated out. And then he subbed back in when they were near the goal line and immediately just bullies the center to get a QB pressure, just completely bulldozes him to get a pressure. And you can see the strength as well. There's consistent drive on his part to keep pushing. Like, there's second effort stuff, there's third effort stuff. He loses the first encounter, he just goes right into the next encounter. He keeps going and going and going. And usually by the time you get to your second or third attempt, it's too late, but he's still trying out there. He's still going to try to find a way to affect the play. You got to respect it. In the second half, it felt like he started lining up in the B gap a little bit more. It was starting to get away from BYU at this point, too, by the way. Obviously, Texas got on top of them at this point. It was never a super blowout, but it was a pretty decisive win. And even still, when Texas goes odd front, he's the nose tackle. There's also a lot of knockback with his impact. Like, when he's lined up on the line and then he gets to build up a little bit of speed going into contact with an offensive lineman or a blocker of any kind, there's big force. And it feels like the blocker is always driven back like 2 or 3 steps before he's able to even try to re-anchor. So there's a big force of impact when he hits. There was one play where he beat the left guard to the outside with speed. He was just able to kind of get the edge on him with his speed and then quickly bend to the inside, so he's actually on the quarterback track. And he got held. It didn't get called, but he still got pressure. So he was really, really destructive in this game overall. It seemed like every time I focused in on him, he was doing something else. every time he tried to shoot a gap, it felt like he could get it. Now, it's BYU, they're not a great team, but every time he wanted to shoot a gap, it felt like he could get it. Got the following drive off. It was a 3-and-out, comes in halfway through the next drive. He bullied through another double team to generate pressure to force a throwaway. It was very close to a sack. Just, again, really impressive ability to, like, split the double team and make it so it's not very effective in slowing him down. There was one rep where he used his hands really well to swat his way through a double team to affect the play. There was one play near the end of this game where he showed amazing jump at the snap. He was kind of almost in garbage time, but there were these 2 reps back to back where I thought he was basically halfway to the quarterback before the offensive lineman was out of his stance, and you see that burst. So this was a great game for Byron Murphy II. This next game I looked at was the Kansas State game, Wildcats. This was a little different. He was not nearly as destructive, and Kansas State's offense was also far more successful than BYU's was. In this game, he had 3 tackles, so he did actually show up on the stat sheet. 6 QB pressures, 42 snaps, 28 of them pass rush, so a little bit more of a sample size. Right as the game starts, he got double teamed. First snap of the game, he's double teamed. So you can see where the focus is. But as that early part of the game went on, there was a play, I think, second play of the game, I want to say, where Ben Sinote, a tight end, was able to actually block him effectively and open up a lane for a running play. So Ben Sinote gets us off to a kind of a ignominious start. The first drive of the game, I thought he was just kind of there. And the second drive, I thought more of the same. He was just kind of like, oh, he's on the field, but he's not really doing anything over the top yet. It's not like the BYU game where it felt like every time he wanted it, he could go get it. It wasn't until the second quarter where I saw him do much. He got big penetration on a run play where he was just able to shoot a gap and get on the running back, but he blew the tackle, so he gave up 4 extra yards. And you can just kind of see him diving at the ankles. You can kind of see him not... Granted, I don't think it was all like some terrible technique thing where he was trying to hit stick him and just blew the play, but you can see why he struggles a little bit to tackle at some points. He had a 2-yard loss on the play. It turned into a 2-yard gain because he missed the tackle. Just kind of tried to wrap up around the legs and didn't get it. There was another play shortly after where he got penetration through a gap and did affect the quarterback, but he ended up on the ground at the quarterback's feet. So only so effective there. And that's probably a big part of the equation here. Why he's getting pressure, but he's not getting sacks is because he's ending up on the ground sometimes where he affected the play, but he wants to stay upright so he can finish it. There was another play where he lined up as an edge rusher and then got the inside shoulder to get pressure. So continues to show off that stuff. He had a really nice gap shoot early in the third quarter for a pressure. He sifted through traffic nicely on one run play, but couldn't quite find the ball carrier. It's still impressive to see him working and kind of shoveling his way through blockers to get to the ball carrier. There was a one nice little move he put on a guard. It was like the initial move was stymied, and then he just kind of shifted to another one. He threw in a counter and was able to get a big quarterback hit that almost forced an interception, I think. There was some nice handwork on his part on one rep in the third quarter here to force the quarterback to climb the pocket. And this game was getting close at the end here because Texas's defense was struggling a little bit. This game ended up going to overtime and very, very nearly was won by KSU. So Murphy had to put on some work at the end here, and it was definitely at the end here where he stood out the most. There was the Sinote catch where he was making the tackle like 20, 25 yards down the field. Late in the game, on a 3rd and 1, he got quick penetration. Like, it was a running play, I think it was, and he just shot the gap and was able to get over to the other side of the field to affect the play. I don't think he made the tackle by himself, but he was involved on the play, and it was a very impressive first step quickness burst. 15 seconds left, he was able to generate really quick pressure on a gap shot, and he didn't get the sack, but he did force a throwaway. And then the next snap, he was able to do a really quick inside move to generate more pressure to force a game-tying field goal. First snap of overtime, he's still being used as like a nose. He's drawing double teams. And on the decisive 4th down of the game, the play that won the game for Texas, his knockback on, I think it was the center, was pretty monstrous and shows his strength as a defensive lineman. All right, those are my notes on those two games. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.